The lobby was quiet in the way places become quiet at the end of a long workday. Not silent, just subdued. The polished marble floor reflected the overhead lights like still water. Glass walls stretched from floor to ceiling, mirroring the city outside where traffic crawled and the sky slipped gradually from gray into dusk. Somewhere near the entrance, the faint smell of coffee lingered mixed with the cool air that rushed in every time the doors opened. Adam Reynolds stood near the reception desk, jacket still on phone in hand. He had planned to leave an hour earlier. He always did. And he never did. Adam was used to controlling time meetings, deadlines, outcomes. His days were built on predictability, on decisions made quickly and efficiently. He had just finished a call that couldn't wait until morning, his voice calm, measured, professional, even as fatigue pressed behind his eyes. When the call ended, he stared briefly at his reflection in the glass, tired but composed. A man who solved problems for a living. "Can I stay here?" The voice was so soft he almost didn't register it. Up next, the following story is not just for entertainment, but also carries lessons about thinking, choices, and responsibility for one's own life. Please listen with awareness. If you do not wish to hear this, please pause the video. At first, Adam assumed he'd imagined it. The building had a way of amplifying echoes, phones ringing, footsteps passing, fragments of conversations bouncing off glass and stone. He frowned, slightly irritation flickering across his face as he lifted his head. Then he froze. A few steps away stood a little girl. She was close enough that Adam wondered how long she had been there without him noticing. 6, maybe 7 years old. Blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail as if it had been done quickly that morning and forgotten since. Her blue eyes were serious, too serious for someone her age. She wore a simple blue school dress, slightly wrinkled, and a red backpack hung heavily from her shoulders, pulling her backward just enough to be noticeable. Both hands gripped the straps tightly, knuckles pale as if letting go might cause something terrible to happen. Adam straightened instinctively. "Can I stay here?" she repeated barely above a whisper. He glanced around the lobby, expecting an adult to appear. A parent rushing in, a teacher, anyone who might explain her presence. No one did. Before he could respond, the girl spoke again. "Someone is following me." The words were delivered calmly. No tears, no dramatics, just a statement of fact as if she had already accepted it and was simply informing him. Adam felt something shift. He looked toward the glass walls, scanning the street outside. People walked past. Cars idled at the light. Everything appeared normal, orderly, safe. The building was monitored, staffed, filled with cameras and guards. This was not a place where danger was supposed to exist. Children imagined things, he told himself, especially at the end of a long school day. Shadows grew longer. Fear filled the quiet spaces adults ignored. "Who's following you?" Adam asked, keeping his voice even. The girl shook her head slightly. "I don't know," she said, "but he's been behind me since I left school." Adam's jaw tightened. He told himself there was a reasonable explanation. There always was. Still, he noticed the way her shoulders tensed, the way her gaze kept drifting toward the glass wall facing the street. "Are you safe here?" he asked carefully. "Maybe you were just scared." She didn't answer right away. Instead, her grip on the backpack straps tightened and her eyes fixed on the glass. Adam followed her gaze. Outside, among the reflections of headlights and street lamps, something shifted. A darker shape moved closer to the glass, just enough to stand apart from the blur of the city. A man stood there, still, watching. Adam's breath caught. In that instant, the lobby no longer felt bright. It felt exposed. The girl stepped closer to him without thinking, her small shoulder brushing his arm. "That's him," she whispered. And suddenly, Adam understood how close he had come, how easy it would have been to ignore a voice that had just asked for a place to be safe. Adam did not look away from the glass. The man outside remained motionless, just far enough from the entrance to blend into the reflections of passing headlights. His face was indistinct, swallowed by shadow and glare, but his posture was unmistakable. He wasn't waiting to enter. He was watching. Adam felt the girl's shoulder press more firmly against his arm. For the first time since she had spoken, fear finally surfaced on her face, not loud or panicked, but controlled, like something she had been holding back for a long time. The lobby seemed to shrink. What had once felt open and secure now felt fragile, separated from the outside world by nothing more than a pane of glass. Adam's instincts kicked in. Slowly, without making any sudden movements, he reached beneath the reception counter and pressed the discreet security button hidden from public view. He had used it before, usually for minor disturbances, delivery issues, misunderstandings. Never for something like this. His hand remained steady, though adrenaline surged through his chest. He glanced down at the girl. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You're inside. He can't get to you." She nodded, but her fingers did not loosen their grip on the backpack straps. "He waits," she whispered. "He always does." The certainty in her voice unsettled him. "How many times have you seen him?" Adam asked. She hesitated, counting silently on her fingers. "3," she said, then paused. "Maybe 4." Adam swallowed. "We're near the school gate," she replied, "sometimes by the store. Today he followed me." The words landed heavily. This wasn't a single moment of fear, it was a pattern. Adam glanced toward the security desk, catching the eye of one of the guards stationed nearby. He didn't speak, just made a small deliberate gesture for him to come closer. The guard, a tall man with calm eyes and an unhurried presence, approached quietly. Adam explained the situation in a low voice, careful not to alarm the girl. The guard nodded once and turned his attention toward the entrance, scanning the street with trained precision. "Did he say anything to you?" Adam asked her. She shook her head. "No, he just looks. When I stop, he stops. When I walk faster, he walks faster." Adam felt his jaw tighten. He was used to solving problems with data with numbers neatly arranged in rows and charts. This was different. This kind of danger didn't announce itself. It hid in patterns and instincts, especially the instincts of children who notice things adults often missed. "We're going to call the police," Adam said, "and we'll call your mom." At the mention of her mother, the girl's face paled. "I don't want her to be mad," she said softly. "She won't be," Adam replied, though he wasn't entirely sure. "You did the right thing." She studied his face carefully, as if weighing whether to believe him. After a long moment, she nodded slowly, deliberately, like someone deciding she didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. Outside, the street returned to its ordinary rhythm. Cars passed. People walked by, unaware of what had nearly unfolded just feet away. Inside, time stretched. The police arrived faster than Adam expected. 2 officers entered, brushing the cold from their jackets, alert but composed. The guard spoke with them near the entrance, gesturing toward the glass and then toward the girl who now stood rigidly beside Adam, her fingers still curled tightly around the straps of her red backpack. Adam crouched slightly to be closer to her height. "They're here to help," he said gently. "You don't have to be afraid." She nodded, though her eyes continued to track every movement reflected in the glass, every shadow, every passing figure. One of the officers knelt in front of her, lowering his voice and softening his posture. He asked where she had walked, how long the man had followed her, what he had been wearing. The girl answered carefully, choosing her words with the seriousness of someone who knew she needed to be believed. As she spoke, Adam felt a weight settle in his chest. This wasn't imagination. It was attention. Unwanted, deliberate attention. The officer stood and spoke quietly with his partner. Adam caught fragments of their conversation, similar reports, a description that sounded familiar. His unease deepened. Moments later, the glass doors slid open again. A woman rushed inside, breathless. Her face pale and strained. Lucy. The girl turned at the sound of her name. Something in her posture finally broke. "Mom," she whispered. The woman dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around her daughter, trembling. "I am so sorry," she said over and over. "I should have been there. I should not have been late." Lucy clung to her, but her eyes flicked briefly toward Adam, as if checking that he was still there. He stayed where he was, close enough to matter, far enough to give them space. The officers explained what had happened. Their voices were calm but serious. When they mentioned similar incidents near the school, the woman's face crumpled. "She told me," she said quietly once. "I thought she was just scared. I did not see anyone." Adam understood that instinct, now the urge to dismiss fear when life was already heavy, when exhaustion left no room for worst-case scenarios. Still, the cost of disbelief hung between them. The officers assured her they would increase patrols and actively search for the man. Statements were taken. Notes were written. Time slipped by almost unnoticed until the lobby lights dimmed slightly, signaling how late it had become. When the police finally left, the building felt too quiet. The girl's mother thanked Adam repeatedly, her gratitude raw and unfiltered. If she had not come in here, she began, unable to finish the sentence. Lucy stepped away from her mother and approached Adam. She hesitated, then spoke. "You stayed," she said simply. Adam met her gaze. "You were brave enough to ask for help," he replied. "That is what mattered." She considered that, then nodded as if storing the idea somewhere safe. As Lucy and her mother walked toward the exit together, Adam watched the doors close behind them. The lobby returned to normal. Phones rang, footsteps echoed, the city moved on. But Adam remained where he was, unsettled by how close danger had come and how easily it could have been missed. That night, sleep did not come easily. When it finally did, it was shallow and restless, filled with fractured images of a small figure standing alone behind glass and a shadow that never fully disappeared. Adam woke before dawn with the strange certainty that the story was not over. The next morning, he canceled his early meetings without explanation. Instead, he drove to the school Lucy had mentioned and parked across the street, sitting in his car longer than necessary. Children arrived in clusters, laughing, backpacks bouncing. Parents kissed foreheads and waved goodbye. Everything looked normal, almost painfully so. Adam stayed anyway. He told himself he was being cautious, that this was not his responsibility. Then he saw him. The man stood near a convenience store across the street, partially obscured by a sign. Average height, neutral clothing, nothing overtly threatening, but he was not buying anything, was not talking to anyone. He was watching the school entrance. Adam's stomach tightened. The man shifted slightly as a group of children passed his gaze, lingering just a moment too long. Adam reached for his phone. "I think I see the man you're looking for," he said quietly when the call connected. Within minutes, police arrived, discreet alert. Adam watched from his car as they approached the man and asked him to step aside. The man resisted, briefly, irritation flashing beneath his calm before he complied. When they took him away, Adam exhaled for what felt like the first time all morning. Later that afternoon, Adam's phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Lucy's mother. They questioned him, she said, her voice shaking. They found things on his phone. Adam closed his eyes. They said if Lucy had not gone into that building, her voice broke. Adam had no words. That evening, Lucy returned to the lobby with her mother. She walked more confidently now, though her eyes still scanned the room out of habit. When she saw Adam, she stopped. "Mom said you watched," she said. He nodded. "I just wanted to make sure." She studied him for a moment, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded drawing. It showed a tall building with bright windows. Inside, two figures stood side by side. "That is where I was safe," she said. Adam took the drawing carefully, and in that quiet moment something inside him shifted more profoundly than any deal he had ever closed. Adam did not frame the drawing, at least not at first. He left it folded on his desk, tucked just beneath a stack of documents he no longer cared about. Every time he reached for his phone or opened a file, the corner of the paper peeked out quietly, reminding him of something that refused to fade. The image followed him in subtler ways too, in reflections, in glass, in the way his attention lingered now instead of moving on. The building returned to its usual rhythm within days. Employees came and went, meetings resumed. Conversations filled the lobby again, layered and forgettable. To anyone watching, nothing had changed, but Adam felt it constantly. A tightness in his chest when footsteps echoed behind him. A pause when a child's voice rose above the noise. A reflexive glance toward the door's corners, places where shadows gathered. He had spent years training himself not to notice these things. Efficiency required blindness. Now he could not stop seeing. Lucy began therapy the following week. Adam learned this through her mother, who called him with an awkward hesitation as though unsure whether she was crossing a boundary that had not been clearly drawn. "They said it is normal," she explained. "She sleeps, but not deeply. She keeps asking what would have happened if you had not been there." Adam listened in silence. The question unsettled him too. He attended the police station later that week to give a formal statement. The room was small and neutral, designed to flatten emotion. Sitting across from the officer, Adam felt oddly exposed, stripped of the authority and confidence that usually surrounded him. For once, his status did not matter. He was just someone who had listened. The officer thanked him before Adam left, not for what he had done afterward, but for believing Lucy when it mattered. Driving back to his office, Adam found himself slowing near a school zone. Children waited at the crosswalk, backpacks slung over one shoulder, some laughing, others quiet and inward. A girl stood slightly apart from the group, eyes fixed on the street alert in a way that felt familiar. Adam stopped completely. The light changed. The children crossed. The moment passed, but something inside him refused to settle. That afternoon, Lucy and her mother returned to the building. This time, Lucy didn't hesitate at the entrance. She walked in with her head held a little higher, though her fingers still brushed the straps of her backpack out of habit. Her eyes scanned the lobby automatically, then softened when she realized she didn't need to. Adam approached, slowly, careful not to overwhelm her. "You came back," he said. Lucy nodded. "Mom wanted to say thank you again," she replied. Then, after a pause, "I wanted to see if it still felt the same." "And does it?" Adam asked. She considered the question seriously. "Yes," she said, "but different." How she searched for the words. Before it was just safe, she said. Now it feels like it remembers. Adam didn't correct her. That evening, after they left, Adam remained in the lobby long after the lights dimmed. He sat where Lucy had stood, where fear had first slipped into the room, and tried to imagine how the space had looked through her eyes that day. Bright, as open, a last option. The realization settled heavily. Safety to a child wasn't an abstract concept. It was a place, a moment, a decision someone else made. And decisions could be repeated. The next morning, Adam made several calls, not to investors, not to executives, to people he had never spoken to before, school administrators, community coordinators, a local nonprofit focused on child safety. He asked questions, listened, took notes. How often did children report being followed? How often were they dismissed? How many times had fear been noticed too late? The answers were uncomfortable. Patterns emerged, quiet ones. Stories that never reached headlines. Moments when nothing happened but only because someone had intervened just in time. Adam redirected resources without announcing it. Funding for better lit walkways near schools. Partnerships with local buildings willing to act as monitored safe places. Training sessions for staff not in defense tactics, but in recognition. The rule he insisted on was simple. When a child says they are afraid, you stop. You listen. You take it seriously. Lucy noticed the changes before most adults did. One afternoon, she asked Adam why there were new signs near her school, bright, clear, impossible to miss. Safe place. "So kids know where to go," Adam explained. She nodded slowly. "Like your building?" "Yes," he said. "Exactly like that." Her smile was small but real. Months passed. The man who had watched from behind the glass was no longer a shadow. He was a case file. Evidence. A threat that would not return to school gates or quiet sidewalks. But fear did not disappear all at once. Lucy still checked reflections in windows. Still paused before crossing empty spaces. The difference was that she no longer did it alone. Her mother adjusted her work schedule, walked with her more often, asked questions instead of dismissing them. And Adam remained present not as a savior frozen in a single moment, but as someone who kept showing up. Sometimes they met in the lobby and talked about ordinary things. Favorite subjects. A teacher Lucy liked. How she wanted to learn about computers someday like the ones in Adam's office. Her voice grew steadier. Her shoulders relaxed. One afternoon, while Lucy colored quietly at a nearby table, her mother spoke to Adam in a low voice. "I didn't want to believe her," she admitted. "Not because I didn't trust my daughter, but because believing her meant admitting how vulnerable she really was." Adam understood that now. Belief demanded action, and action was frightening. Lucy looked up from her drawing. "You listened," she said matter-of-factly. Adam smiled. "So did you," he replied. She tilted her head. "I thought adults didn't listen to kids," she said. "Some don't." Adam answered honestly. "But some just need to be reminded how." The drawing she finished that day showed two pictures side by side. In one, a small figure stood alone outside a glass wall, a shadow looming behind it. In the other, the shadow was crossed out with a bold red line. Inside the building, light filled the space. "That's where he can't go," Lucy said. Adam felt the familiar tightening in his chest, but this time it wasn't fear. It was responsibility. He finally framed the first drawing that night and hung it in his office not as a reminder of danger, but of attention. Of what happened when someone chose to stay. The world outside remained complex and imperfect. Adam knew that. He hadn't fixed everything. He hadn't saved everyone. But he had learned something fundamental. Sometimes the most important change doesn't begin with power or authority. It begins the moment someone hears a small voice and decides not to walk away. The changes didn't announce themselves. There were no press releases, no plaques, No speeches delivered under bright lights. What Adam set in motion moved quietly the way meaningful things often did, noticed first by those who needed them most. He began by walking more, not for exercise, not to clear his head, but to see. He took routes he'd avoided for years, past elementary schools at dismissal time, along narrow sidewalks where shadows pooled late in the afternoon, through neighborhoods where buildings were close enough that voices echoed between them. He watched the way children moved through the world, how some laughed loudly and ran ahead while others stayed just a step behind, eyes alert, shoulders tight. It unsettled him how easy it was to tell the difference once he knew how to look. At meetings, he started asking questions that had nothing to do with profit. How well lit is the block behind the school? Who is monitoring the side entrance? If a child walks in alone, do your staff know what to do? At first, people blinked. Some shifted in their chairs. Others offered vague reassurances. Procedures existed. Policies were in place. Adam listened, then asked again more precisely. He had learned something crucial. Systems failed not because they were malicious, but because they assumed silence meant safety. He refused to make that assumption anymore. The resistance came quietly too. A building manager questioned the need for additional training. A community board member worried about unnecessary alarm. An executive suggested that Adam's focus had drifted from core priorities. Adam heard them all. Then he remembered Lucy's voice, steady, soft, already used to not being believed. He didn't argue. He didn't moralize. He showed patterns. Incidents that never became reports. Close calls filed away as nothing happened. He framed it the way people like him understood best prevention was cheaper than recovery. Attention saved resources. Silence cost more than anyone wanted to admit. Slowly, doors opened. Training sessions were scheduled. Protocols revised. Staff learned how to respond not with panic, but with presence. The emphasis was simple. If a child asked for help, you stayed. You didn't redirect. You didn't minimize. You stayed until someone else could take over. Adam insisted on role-playing. Adults practiced kneeling to eye level, speaking slowly, asking open questions, letting pauses exist without filling them. It was uncomfortable at first, unnatural for people used to control and efficiency, but it worked. Lucy noticed the difference almost immediately. She pointed it out one afternoon while she and Adam sat in the lobby waiting for her mother. "They don't rush me anymore," she said. "Who?" Adam asked. "The grown-ups," she replied. "When I talk, they don't look at their phones." Adam felt something tighten, then ease. "That's how it should be," he said. Lucy nodded as if committing the observation to memory. The trial progressed quietly. Adam was called once more to give testimony. This time he entered the courthouse with a calm resolve he hadn't expected. He wasn't there to recount fear. He was there to state facts, what he had seen, what he had chosen to do, and what had followed. Belief, action, outcome. The man behind the glass was no longer a shadow. He was a person held accountable by evidence and by timing. The verdict, when it came, was firm, final. No spectacle, no headlines. Lucy's mother called Adam that evening. "It's over," she said. Adam closed his eyes, absorbing the weight of the words. "How is she?" he asked. "She slept," her mother replied, "all the way through the night." Relief came quietly without celebration. In the weeks that followed, Lucy changed in ways that were easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. Her steps grew less measured. Her laughter came more readily. She still noticed reflections, still checked corners, but her body no longer braced for impact at every unfamiliar sound. Caution had softened into awareness. One afternoon, as they walked together after school, Lucy stopped near a crosswalk. Another girl from her class stood nearby, hesitating, eyes darting down the street. Lucy glanced at Adam, then stepped toward the girl. "That building over there," she said, pointing to a small library with a bright sign in the window. "That's a safe place." The girl's shoulders relaxed instantly. "Okay," she said, relief plain in her voice. Lucy watched her go, thoughtful rather than proud. Later, she told Adam about it in the lobby. "I didn't want her to feel alone," she said. Adam felt a pressure behind his eyes. "You did exactly right," he replied. That night, Adam stayed late again, but this time he wasn't finishing calls or closing deals. He sat alone in the lobby observing the flow of people. Adults hurried past children without really seeing them. Conversations overlapped, life pressed forward indifferent and efficient. He understood now how easily Lucy's voice could have disappeared into that noise. The thought unsettled him more than any shadow ever had. He began funding visible markers, nothing dramatic, nothing frightening. Just clarity. Signs that said, "Safe place." Staff badges with a simple icon. Entrances kept unlocked a little longer in the afternoons. Subtle changes that whispered reassurance rather than demanded attention. The feedback came from unexpected places. A receptionist told him a child had come in crying and left calmer. A security guard mentioned a boy who waited quietly until his older brother arrived. A teacher sent a short note. "Whatever you're doing, it matters." Adam never replied publicly. He didn't need recognition. What mattered was repetition. Consistency. The quiet reliability of someone being there again and again. Lucy returned to the building less often now, not because it felt unsafe, but because safety had followed her outward. When she did come, she moved through the lobby with familiarity, greeting the receptionist by name, waving at the guard. One afternoon, she stopped near the glass wall. The sun slanted low, casting long shadows that moved gently as people passed outside. She watched them without fear. "It's not scary anymore," she said. "No," Adam agreed. "It's not." She turned toward him, serious but calm. "Do you think places remember things?" she asked. Adam considered the question. Maybe he said, "I think people do, and they leave something behind." Lucy smiled. "Then this place remembers helping," she said. Adam looked around the light, the glass, the steady rhythm of ordinary life, and realized she was right. The memory wasn't the shadow. It was the moment someone stayed. As the months passed, Adam found his priorities shifting in ways that surprised even him. Success no longer felt like accumulation. It felt like attention, the discipline of noticing, the willingness to pause when something didn't feel right. He spoke less in meetings, listened more. And when a small voice cut through the noise, literal or otherwise, he didn't dismiss it. He stayed. The world hadn't become safer overnight. Adam knew that. Danger still existed, quiet and patient. But so did belief. And belief, he had learned, could redraw invisible lines. Lines that shadows could not cross. Lines that began the moment someone chose to listen. Time did what it always did. It moved forward without ceremony. Days stacked into weeks. Weeks softened into months. The sharp edges of that evening in the lobby blurred not into forgetfulness, but into something quieter, something that could be carried without constant pain. For Lucy, the fear did not vanish all at once. It loosened. At first, it was in the smallest things. She stopped sleeping with the hallway light on. She no longer insisted on sitting with her back to the wall in restaurants. The pauses in her steps grew shorter. Her questions changed to less about what might happen, more about what came next. Her therapist explained it simply: fear had stopped being the center of her world. It was no longer in charge. Adam noticed the change the way he noticed most things now, by paying attention. When Lucy came to the building, she no longer scanned the glass for reflections before stepping inside. She walked straight in her backpack, resting comfortably against her shoulders instead of being clutched like armor. She talked more, asked questions, sometimes laughed, surprised by the sound of it herself. One afternoon, while they sat near the window watching people pass outside, Lucy spoke without looking at him. "I still remember," she said. Adam nodded. He didn't ask what. He didn't need to. "But it doesn't feel like it's happening right now," she added. "It feels like a story I already told." Adam felt the weight of that. A story told was a story shared. And shared stories lost some of their power to isolate. Her mother changed too. The exhaustion that once sat permanently in her posture eased. Not because life had become easier, but because she no longer carried everything alone. She listened differently now, asked follow-up questions, trusted her daughter's instincts even when they disrupted plans or routines. One evening, she admitted something to Adam as Lucy colored nearby. "I used to think being a good parent meant teaching her not to be afraid," she said quietly. "Now, I think it means teaching her that fear is information, not a weakness." Adam nodded. "That's a hard lesson for adults too," he replied. Lucy looked up at them. "My teacher says feelings are clues," she said. Adam smiled. "Your teacher is right." The programs Adam had helped establish continued quietly. They did not eliminate danger. Nothing could. But they shortened response times, clarified responsibility, removed ambiguity. When a child walked into a building alone, staff knew what to do. When someone said they felt unsafe, the response was immediate, not dismissive. When something didn't make sense, it was investigated instead of explained away. There were no dramatic rescues, just fewer close calls, and that Adam learned was the point. One morning, he received a handwritten note from a school administrator. "We had a student come in yesterday. He said he didn't feel right walking home. We followed protocol. He waited here until his aunt arrived. He smiled when he left." Adam folded the note carefully and placed it in his desk drawer, beside Lucy's drawing. The city moved as it always had, fast-layered and different, but Adam moved through it differently now. He slowed at crosswalks, noticed who lingered and who hurried, paid attention to the spaces between things. It wasn't paranoia. It was presence. He found himself speaking less about outcomes and more about responsibility, less about control and more about care. Some colleagues noticed, a few questioned it, most adapted. Change he had learned didn't need permission. It needed consistency. Lucy grew more comfortable with silence again, not the tense silence of vigilance, but the relaxed quiet of safety. She talked about school projects, about a science fair she was nervous about wanting to learn how computers worked from the inside. "You already know how to notice patterns," Adam told her one day. "That's a big part of it." She considered this seriously. "So I'm already practicing," she said. "You are," he replied. Months later, Lucy and her mother moved to a different neighborhood, closer to family, closer to her school. The day they came to say goodbye to the building, Lucy walked slowly through the lobby, touching the edge of the reception desk, the smooth surface of the glass. "This was my first safe place," she said quietly. Adam felt a familiar pressure in his chest, not sadness exactly, something heavier, something grateful. "You helped make it one," he said. Lucy shook her head. "No," she replied. "You just believed me." The simplicity of it struck him again. Belief had been the beginning. Everything else had followed. They hugged goodbye, not tightly, not dramatically, just enough. Lucy waved as she left, disappearing into the flow of the city without hesitation, without looking back at the glass. Adam stood there long after the doors closed. He understood now that safety wasn't a moment frozen in time. It was a practice, a choice repeated daily, often invisibly. The danger had been removed, but the lesson remained. In quiet moments, Adam still thought about how close he had come to walking away that first evening. How easily he could have dismissed a voice that didn't match his expectations of urgency or importance. The thought no longer haunted him. It guided him. He kept the drawing on his wall not as a reminder of fear, but of attention, of the weight a single decision could carry. Sometimes, late in the evening, he stood near the glass and watched the reflections move across it, people, passing lights, shifting shadows, stretching and dissolving. They no longer unsettled him. They reminded him of the line that had been drawn, of the moment someone had stayed, of the understanding that safety begins long before danger announces itself, and that believing one small voice could change far more than a single night. The city never paused to acknowledge what had changed. Morning traffic still pressed forward. Lights still blinked from red to green. People hurried with coffee in hand, minds already ahead of their bodies. On the surface, nothing marked the shift that had taken root. But Adam felt it everywhere, not as urgency, as awareness. He noticed it in elevators, how children stood slightly apart from adults, how their eyes traced exits before settling. He noticed it on sidewalks, how some kids instinctively stayed close to storefronts where glass and light offered a sense of protection. He noticed it in himself, most of all, the way he now slowed when something felt off, even when there was no clear reason to do so. It was a discipline, this kind of attention. One he practiced daily. The programs he had helped seed matured quietly. Not into institutions with names and logos, but into habits. Teachers knew which doors to keep open during dismissal. Receptionists learned how to read hesitation in a child's posture. Guards learned that the most important skill wasn't authority. It was patience. When something didn't make sense, people asked another question instead of moving on. That was the difference. Adam never spoke publicly about Lucy. He never needed to. Her story lived in fragments across the city, small echoes of the same lesson repeating in different places. A boy who waited inside a pharmacy until his ride arrived. A girl who asked a librarian to call her grandmother. A child who said, "I don't feel right," and was believed the first time. Adam collected these moments quietly, not as victories, but as confirmations. One evening, as he reviewed reports in his office, his assistant hesitated at the door. "There's someone here asking to see you," she said. "A parent, from the school district." Adam nodded, closing the folder he hadn't really been reading. The woman who entered looked tired but resolute. She held herself with the careful composure of someone who had learned to stay upright under strain. "My son came home last week," she began, "and told me he went to a safe place." Adam listened. "He said he didn't feel right walking past the construction site. He said someone had been standing there too long. The receptionist stayed with him. Called me. No one told him he was overreacting." Her voice wavered. "I didn't know how close I'd come to teaching him not to trust himself." Adam felt the familiar tightening, then the release. "You did the right thing by listening," he said. She shook her head gently. "No," she replied. "You helped make it possible." After she left, Adam remained seated, staring at the city through the glass. He understood now that systems didn't replace people. They supported them, gave them permission to act on instincts they already had. Lucy called him one afternoon. Her voice sounded older, not in years but in confidence. "We learned about responsibility in class," she said. "The teacher said it means noticing when something needs you." Adam smiled. "That's a good definition," he replied. Lucy hesitated. "I told her about the building," she added, "about how someone listened." Adam didn't speak right away. "What did she say?" he asked. "She said I was brave," Lucy replied. "But I think you were too." Adam considered that. "I think bravery is quieter than people expect," he said. "Sometimes it just looks like staying." Lucy laughed softly. "I like that," she said. As seasons shifted, Adam found himself invited into conversations he hadn't sought. City planners asked about lighting and visibility. Community leaders asked about training. Employers asked how to support employees who were parents walking a careful line between work and vigilance. Adam answered honestly. He told them what he knew and what he didn't. He emphasized that attention could not be outsourced, that believing children wasn't a liability, it was a safeguard. Some resisted. Change always met friction, but enough listened. Lucy grew taller. Her backpack changed lighter, now chosen for comfort rather than habit. She moved with a natural ease that once seemed impossible. She still noticed details others missed. The difference was that those details no longer controlled her. They informed her. One afternoon, she and Adam stood again near the glass wall of the lobby. The city beyond looked ordinary, crowded, layered, alive. Lucy watched the reflections for a moment, then turned to him. "I don't feel small anymore," she said. Adam felt a weight settle, not heavy, but grounding. "That matters," he replied. Lucy nodded. "I know I can ask," she said, "and I know someone will stay." The truth of it stayed with Adam long after she left. He realized then that the work was never really about preventing every possible harm. That was impossible. It was about shrinking the space between fear and response, about making sure that when a child reached out there was less distance to cross. Late one night, Adam received a message from a former colleague. "You seem different," it read. "Calmer, more deliberate." Adam smiled faintly. He was. He had stopped measuring success solely by expansion and control. He measured it now by consistency, by how often he chose to notice, by how reliably he stayed when it would have been easier to move on. He thought again of that first evening, the lobby quiet, the city dimming the voice that had nearly been lost to the noise of his own urgency. He understood now that the moment hadn't been singular. It had been the first of many. Each day presented its own version of the same choice. Sometimes it arrived as a small hesitation. Sometimes as a question left hanging. Sometimes as a child standing just a little too still. Adam practiced answering the same way. He slowed, he listened, he stayed. The city didn't change overnight. But in the spaces where attention was practiced, where belief was offered freely, something subtle and resilient took root. Lucy would grow up. She would leave that city someday. She would encounter other places, other systems, other adults. Adam couldn't protect her from all of that. But he could give her something lasting, the certainty that her voice mattered. And that certainty, Adam had learned, traveled farther than any building ever could. The building never changed its shape. The glass remained tall and clear. The floors stayed polished. The doors opened and closed with the same quiet precision they always had. To anyone passing through it was just another place, efficient, modern, forgettable. But Adam knew better. Places he had learned were not defined by architecture alone. They were shaped by moments, by decisions that left no visible mark but altered the way people moved through them afterward. Lucy came by one last time before summer. She was taller now, older. Her red backpack had been replaced with a new one, lighter, chosen carefully, no longer clutched like a lifeline. She walked beside her mother with an easy confidence, her steps unmeasured, her gaze forward. When she saw Adam, she smiled without hesitation. "I wanted to say goodbye," she said. Adam nodded. "I figured." They stood together near the glass wall, the city unfolding outside in its usual rhythm. Cars passed, people crossed the street. Shadows stretched and dissolved as the light shifted. Lucy watched for a moment. "It doesn't scare me anymore," she said. "No," Adam replied. "It doesn't." She turned toward him, serious in the way she always had been, thoughtful beyond her years, but lighter now. "I think I know why," she added. Adam waited. "Because I know what to do if it ever does," she said. "I know I can ask, and I know someone will listen." Adam felt something settle deep within him. "That's important," he said. Lucy nodded. Then, almost as an afterthought, she reached into her bag and pulled out a final drawing. It showed a wide street full of people. In the center stood a small figure, not alone, not afraid, surrounded by light. There were no shadows this time. "I wanted you to have this," she said. Adam took it carefully. "Thank you," he replied. Lucy smiled once more and stepped back to her mother's side. As they walked toward the exit, she didn't look back at the glass. She didn't need to. The doors closed softly behind them. The lobby returned to its familiar hum. Phones rang. Footsteps echoed. The world kept moving forward, unaware of what had quietly passed through that space. Adam remained where he was. He thought about how close he had come, how easily he could have missed everything. How a single moment of distraction, a single decision to hurry on, might have erased a future he would never have known was lost. That thought no longer filled him with regret. It filled him with resolve. Listening, he understood now, was not a reaction. It was a practice. It meant slowing down when the world urged speed. It meant taking discomfort seriously. It meant believing before proof demanded it. And sometimes it meant staying when leaving would have been easier. Adam carried that practice into every part of his life. Into meetings, into conversations, into the spaces between words where meaning often hid. He didn't always get it right. No one did. But he stayed open. And in doing so, he changed more than one outcome. Some legacies were built with buildings and names engraved in stone. Others were built quietly, passed hand to hand, voice to voice. A child who learned she could trust herself. An adult who learned to listen. A moment that repeated itself not once but again and again. As Adam turned to leave the lobby that evening, he paused beside the glass one last time. His reflection looked back at him, older, steadier, unmistakably changed. He knew now that safety did not begin with locks or cameras. It began with attention, with belief, with the simple, powerful act of staying when someone asked for a place to be safe. And sometimes that was enough to change everything. Sometimes the moments that change everything don't arrive with noise or warning. They arrive quietly in a voice that hesitates, in a question that could be ignored in a second, where someone must choose whether to keep walking or to stop and listen. The story isn't about fear, it's about attention. It's about what happens when an adult takes a child seriously, when belief comes before proof, when kindness isn't dramatic but deliberate. Because safety doesn't always begin with locks or cameras. It often begins with the human being who stays. If this story moved you, let it be a reminder. Your attention matters more than you think. Your willingness to listen could become someone else's turning point. And if you believe that small acts of kindness can quietly change lives, you're in the right place. This is Tales of Kindness, where stories remind us that compassion still exists, and that choosing empathy even once can echo farther than we ever expect. If you found meaning here, please like the video. Share it with someone who believes kindness still matters. And subscribe to Tales of Kindness for more stories that restore faith in humanity. Until next time, remember, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is simply listen and stay.